do I build deep connections with new friends when everyone just wants to have small talk? Hello, Hayes. I moved to a new city a few months ago, and I'm struggling to build meaningful connections with people I meet. I've moved a few times before and was always able to build deep friendships that involved sharing personal reflections on each other's lives, as well as engaging in conversations about politics, arts, and society. I should say that these were always in environments that facilitated friendship making, like on campus or at any of the nonprofits I've worked at. Although my past friendships didn't happen overnight, we built real connections pretty early on, but now I'm feeling stuck in this prolonged small talk phase. It's easy to meet people my age in my new city. There are lots of open group events and activities, so that's not really a problem. I find that whenever I talk to someone during these events or meet for a coffee later, I'm struggling to go beyond small talk. I always come away feeling that I'm not making progress and really getting to know the other person, even if we've met a few times before. And by small talk, I mean top-line chat about travel, plans for the week, maybe our jobs or what we like about this city. I do try to ask follow-up questions, but somehow they seem to lead to a dead end, and our conversation stays a bit general or shallow. It's really important to me to feel like people really know me, and I derive a lot of joy from having deep connections with my friends, but now I feel like building friendships is no longer coming naturally to me. I know that building friendships takes time and that I also shouldn't expect to click with everyone, but I think at least part of the problem has to do with how I approach these conversations in meetups. Do you have any advice on how to foster connection with people you only met recently? What are some good conversation subjects or questions that can help you get to know the other person without being too intrusive early on? In the meantime, how do I make myself feel less lonely until I build more meaningful friendships? Yours, lonely girl in a new city. First thing is that building deep relationships definitely does take time. You say this a couple of times in your letter, so I know you understand this intellectually, but there's a gap between what you know to be true as an intelligent person and what you feel to be true or what you feel in general, which that gap exists for all of us, probably on every challenge we faced. So you're definitely not alone there. And I want to, just because you know it takes a long time doesn't make it any easier when it is taking a long time. And I think that there are ways that we can make the connection you're looking for come faster. But that will involve thinking about the situation a little bit differently. So there are several things I noticed in your letter that I want to unpack and reframe with you that I think might help. So the first thing I want to talk about is what counts as small talk. The way you're describing, well, let me rewind. I don't think that small talk is topical. I think that small talk, especially when it has the negative connotation, is more of like a vibe or a feeling. Like you're just talking to this person to make time pass. You're stuck with them at a party while your other friends go to the bathroom and you have to just like pull something out of your ass and you're uncomfortable. So you're resorting to topics that are pretty basic. There's that's what I think of when I think of small talk in the negative way. The topics that you're referencing, that you're discussing with these new people that you meet, work, travel plans, what you're doing over the weekend, I think that those topics are not inherently small talk. Those can be discussed in really interesting and meaningful ways, and they definitely don't need to be shallow. In fact, work, travel, what we do in our downtime, like those are the things that, constitute a life. On that same note, with how you're thinking about small talk, I am curious about how you mentioned art, politics, and society as the topics that you're interested in or that you used to talk about with former friends. I think that those are somewhat highbrow interests. I am also interested in those things, but it might benefit you at this stage of friendship to be approaching your conversations and your meetings with people with a wider range of what you might be interested in talking about. I think that art, for example, art is something that lots of people can come to and have an interesting conversation about and have opinions about, but it might not immediately be something that someone realizes they're interested in. So if you're coming to meeting new people with like, I want to talk about art, politics, and society, I don't know, you might be giving off an energy that people don't feel comfortable connecting with you because of how intellectual those topics may seem at first. The second thing is that I want you to stop thinking of your friendships as something that you need to make progress on. It's definitely important to notice how you feel after hanging out with someone, but the way you feel might be kind of clouded if what you're looking to feel is like you're getting to the next level every time you hang out. I don't think that French, hanging out with friends, new friends, does not always need to have such a clear takeaway. I think friendships have a slower build, especially as we get older. And if you're approaching each of these coffee hangouts or meetups with like a clear objective of getting to the next level, of learning something new, of, excavating a little bit deeper information about them, that could be coming across as a little bit intense. You know, we're not always as good as masking our intentions as we think we are. And if that's how you're approaching all of these situations, other people might be able to tell. The third thing is that you mentioned how you don't think your friendships, making friends, is coming to you as naturally as it was before. And I want to point out to you that you're making friends now in a completely new environment. It's different here. Making friends off of campus, outside of a nonprofit group where you worked, where everybody is theoretically interested in the same type of thing, it's different here. So it feels unnatural because it's new. Don't write it off, though, as that you're no longer good at making friends. You're just learning to make friends in a new environment, which would be different for everybody. And I think in particular, thinking about college, there's something to relate back to what you said about speed. It's not happening fast. I know it's not going to happen overnight, but I kind of want it to happen faster. When you make friends in college, or even in a job, there's some degree of like, our time here is finite. And because of that, even if you're not doing it consciously, I think we do latch on to people quicker because we know that the time is going to end somewhat soon. But then you leave college and life suddenly is very stretched out. There aren't these clear demarcations of, okay, I'm going to be with these people for the next 4 years. Like everyone you meet, you could theoretically be friends with for a really, really, really long time. And because of that, I think that subconsciously impacts the way we make friendships. We're not in such a rush. You don't need to be in such a rush. There isn't a looming deadline, which is actually really nice because you have time. You also mentioned that it's easy to hang out with people within your age range, but I want to toss out to you that you might want to consider expanding your age range of friends. I've always found a lot of joy in developing friendships with people who are older than me. Like in my jobs, I've always had friends who were my age, but then developed friendships with people who were like 10, 15 years my senior. And those relationships often scratched some of the connection itch that I was looking for that maybe wasn't always present in the friendships with people my age. Those can be found at work. When I was living in New York, I developed this really special friendship with my facialist, Tony, who was, closer to my mom's age. And that began by, I went to go see her for facials almost every month because that's one of the things that I like to do for myself. And we would just chat. I'd demonstrate that I was open to chatting, and I'd ask her questions about her life. She grew up in Chinatown in Manhattan, and I was really curious about that. And I forget how it started, but one night she invited me out. She was friendly with a couple of her other clients. So clearly this is something that she was sort of comfortable with, being friends with clients. And it's something that I had done before too. Like when I was in college, I had sort of had a similar type of friendship with the woman who I got facials from. But Tony invited me to, her favorite restaurant in Chinatown. And I think our friendship kind of began from there. And then slowly we started going out to eat together a lot. And that friendship was really precious to me in a different way than my friendships with my college friends are, or other people my age. So I would just encourage you to think beyond the obvious, let's be friends with other 25-year-olds. The last thing is you say that it's really important to feel known by your friends, to be known by the people who you're in relationships with. And I agree. I also want to be known. I think we all deeply want to be known. But I wonder if it would be helpful for you to think about, to answer this question, what do I want my friends to know about me? Because there are so many layers to who you are as a person, and it takes time for people to get to know those layers. And you also might find that some people will get to know certain layers of you, but not all layers of you. And I think that this sort of relates back to Six Besties theory, how we have different friends for different purposes. There are so many parts of you, and it can be really special for different friends to speak to different parts of you. Not every friend you meet needs to speak to each part of your soul, but it might help you to kind of make a list of what are the different things about me that I want that I want to be known for. Being able to talk about art, being able to talk about politics, those might be important to you, and that is totally okay. But every single friend you meet might not need to know you in that specific way. By making a list of all of the different things you want to be known for, you can start to reflect more on the pieces of yourself that you actually want to share. You asked me a couple of questions at the end of your letter that I want to address. So the first one is, what are some good conversation subjects or questions that can help you get to know the other person without being too intrusive early on? So I think a great way to build a meaningful connection with somebody else is to ask them for help or for advice. Excuse me. Now, that's not the same thing as being vulnerable, because I know that, like, yes, a great way to build connections is to be vulnerable, and people kind of roll their eyes at that advice, though I do think it's true. But you don't necessarily need to be vulnerable when you're asking for help or advice, because the thing you ask for help or advice for doesn't need to be like something you're particularly vulnerable about. It doesn't need to be about your deepest wound. But I think that asking for help, receiving help, providing help, guidance, opinions, that's a really good way to build a connection with someone. So if you meet somebody new at one of these meetups and you know that you could like design a question to get their opinion, even if it's not something inherently that you're desperate for help on. You know what I'm saying? I want to be clear though, that's not like strategic or manipulative. It's just thoughtful. So you don't want to make something up that you need advice on, but it doesn't also need to be something that you're, stressing about in bed at night. The other way to get to know somebody is to be curious about stuff that they're interested in, not just stuff that you're interested in. An example of this is I've made a couple of new friends recently, and one of these new friends, I just got dinner with her and the other connecting friend the other night, and she is super passionate about Disney theme parks and like Universal theme parks. She has a podcast about it, actually. I'll link it in the description. Her name's Carly. Actually, let me just tell you what it's called. The podcast is called Very Amusing, and she's so fucking smart. But I have to admit that before I met Carly, I definitely had a bias about like people who like Disney. There's definitely like some internet discourse about Disney families and stuff. And I wasn't super well versed in that discourse, but I definitely didn't think that I was going to be interested in theme park content or theme park stuff. If someone said to me, oh, this girl likes that, maybe you guys would be friends, I'd be like, I don't think so. Turns out, though, I'm fucking fascinated by Disney theme parks now. In fact, this YouTuber, Jenny Nicholson, just came out with a 4-hour, basically it's a documentary about a failed Star Wars immersive hotel in Disney. And we talked about that YouTube video at dinner. And you better believe that I'm halfway through that 4-hour documentary about Star Wars. And I texted Carly the other night saying, I'm so glad I met you because now I get to learn about something that I would never have thought that I was interested in. And it's opened up a whole new interest for me. And I guess this is what I'm saying when I come back to the art, society, politics thing. Like, don't go into these new friendships with people assuming that you already know what you're interested in. Go into these friendships and these new connections with really open-minded curiosity. Because what you're probably attracted to are people who are passionate about something, even if it's not what you're passionate about. And one of the best parts about making new friends is learning about each other's curiosities. This is how we learn and evolve as adults. If you're only with people who are into the same thing as you, then you just end up being in an echo chamber. So be curious about what they're curious in. You could do a little stalking them on Instagram to see what they like, and then you could say, hey, I noticed you went to Disney the other day. Have you always liked going to Disney? Stuff like that. And then I also think you can build camaraderie on things that are personal but not too intimate. Like, a great way to get close to someone is to find something that you can mutually complain about or like vent about. For example, what's your boss like? Do you like your coworkers? Even though you don't have the same boss, you can probably relate to like annoying things bosses do. You can also ask questions like, maybe how does this city compare to where you grew up? That can be a way to talk about someone's upbringing without asking. Assumptive is not a word. Without it, what's assumptive? Assumptive. God, when you say a word and then you're like, is this a word? I don't think assumptive is a word. What I'm trying to say is family stuff can be particularly tricky to ask people about because you can accidentally make a lot of assumptions about the way they grew up. For example, if you say, oh, what do your parents do? That can open up like a whole can of worms. But by asking, how does this compare to where you grew up? Where's your family from? Questions like that can then open the door for the other person to share, and you can get information about them naturally without asking, without poking. You also asked me, in the meantime, how do I make myself feel less lonely until I build more meaningful friendships? Don't forget your friends that don't live in your city. So what are some of the other meaningful relationships that you have that you've already built that deep connection with? Call them. Those friendships are still really important to maintain. When I first moved to LA and I hadn't yet made many in-person friends here, I didn't really feel lonely. One, because I was here with Brian, which I know helps a lot. Obviously, living with your partner here naturally made me a little bit less lonely. But I also every week I was calling somebody. At least once a week, I was having a long phone conversation with one of my friends back on the East Coast. We were jamming in that way, in that deep, meaningful way that you're looking for with your new friends. So I think that don't forget about your long distance or your online relationships. I think that can really, really help. And inherently, I think that reframing the small talk piece, I think that will make you feel less lonely because you won't be reframing the small talk, going into the conversations with a little bit of less of an agenda, being more open-minded. You might find that you'll be more delighted by the small talk because you realize, oh, this isn't actually small talk. This is the meat of how friendships are made, by talking about the mundane stuff. And that's all I have for today. If you were watching this on YouTube, or even if you listened to the audio-only version, tell me, how have you deepened connections with new friends? Would love to hear your advice and tips so that we can all learn from each other and make this an ongoing list of helpful advice. I appreciate you all, and I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you soon.